Welcome back to the Snod Pod with John Snodgrass, your mortgage resource, where we're talking mortgages, real estate, building inspection, and beyond. I've got Paul Wolfgramm from the City of Wauwatosa. He's a building inspector, back for a second episode because I got a lot more questions to ask. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So one of the questions I forgot to ask on last episode was, so if I'm a real estate agent and we're about to list my house and I did work where I didn't pull permits, should I tell, if I'm the realtor, should I tell the seller, like, hey, you should really go to the city and get permits? Or I guess, what do you stand on something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that doing work in the city of Wauwatosa, you need a permit before you start work to avoid a time crunch at the time of sale if you're going to pull a permit then. So it's always a good idea to pull a permit. Certainly better to do it before construction starts. Sure. But at least if you're going through the selling process, go ahead and pull those permits and make sure that all your old permits are closed out. Going through and looking at all the previous permits that you had, that all the final inspection was done also, so that you have a clean record that you're handing over to the buyer is great. If there's any permits that weren't pulled, I guess better late than never. Pull those permits and pull those before you have a closing date already hard set, so that you have the time to have the permits in, to get any work installed or corrected that needs to be done, have those inspections done, so you can have that work finished before you have a hard deadline of a closing date that you're trying to meet.
Okay. What about if I didn't pull permits and I don't mention it to anybody and I sell the house? Does the new buyer, the new owner of the house, let's say, you're doing your assessment and you notice some work that was done and you're like, hey, I got to get in those walls. There was some work done and there were no permits pulled. I guess, does the new homeowner have to pay any fines or any permit fees? Or?
Yeah, so the permits stick to the property. So let's say homeowner number one does some work, doesn't pull a permit, sells it to homeowner number two. Homeowner number two sells it to homeowner number three, but homeowner number three does their due diligence and finds out that there is work without a permit. The second homeowner is going to be the one who's on the hook for going through and doing that work. Now, the second, and I'm not a lawyer, but sure. The second owner could theoretically go back after the first owner, from a legal and maybe try to get some compensation for this work if there was something that wasn't properly disclosed. Okay. But as a municipality, we'll be looking for the current owner, regardless of who caused the problem, to then go and make those corrections once it comes to our attention.
Okay, got it. So again, we're not attorneys. I'm going to have a real estate attorney on back again. I've had one on already, but. It's possible to go, if I wanted to go back and say, hey, look, you did this work, you got to pay for this.
I know of people who have tried to do that. I don't know how successful they were. Okay. But I know, and this does come up. Yeah. So all the more reason that when you're buying, in a great way for realtors to protect their buyers is to go back, especially if the MLS listing is advertising, hey, new renovated kitchen or this new addition. Yeah. Do your due diligence and check with the city to make sure that there were permits that were pulled for it, so that you're not exposing your buyer to problems down the road. Okay.
I mean, that's great advice. I'm just thinking Wauwatosa, and you said you were city of Milwaukee too for a while. I know there's some homes that go back to the 1800s. I mean, anything, and there's... I've had some buyers that like, hey, I really want a house that has character, an old farmhouse. Like, to me, that sounds like a nightmare. I don't want anything to do with that. But what do you see in those type of homes? Anything that buyers should be aware about, before buying a really old home?
Sure. So I think that older homes, remodels in those houses are certainly more complicated than remodels in a newer house. Mm-hmm. And when you open up the wall, you just never know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to see inside there. You just don't know until you do that demolition. So we have the code has gone through a number of changes since the late 1800s and continues to go through changes. Very rarely are new codes retroactive. So the new codes only apply to new construction. So if you have existing construction, the building doesn't have to change just because we adopted a new code. Okay. There are some that have been retroactive, such as smoke detection and carbon monoxide detection, and those are relatively easy to go ahead and put in. It's an easy, simple life safety measure that's really important to have in your house. In general, when you're doing the work, existing construction can remain as long as it was permitted legally. There's no signs of obvious distress, or there's no obvious safety hazard associated with that work, and if it's being maintained.
Okay. So don't necessarily need to worry about, hey, I bought this old house and got to rip out everything to get everything up to code, as long as it's in working condition.
That's correct. One from a building standpoint, something that I run into commonly is headers above openings. So the older construction would have a kind of a diaphragm construction where you lath and plaster on the inside, and then one by construction the outside, and that diaphragm really held everything together. Okay. If you go in and remove that lath and plaster on the inside, now we're affecting the structural integrity of that wall, and new headers may be required above existing windows.
Okay. I had this one happen like 2 weeks ago. I got a call from a buyer that was thinking about writing an offer. I think it was either Tosa or West Allis, but the sellers had been there like 60 years. They're in the 90s and selling, and they had like an old, I don't know, boiler, and it was still in working condition, and it was like 50 plus years old. I mean, to me, so I called my friend at Mr. Holland Services. I'm like, hey, what would a new, cost? He's like, you know what? Those things can keep going. So, I mean, there's no need to just replace it now. I don't know. Can you opine on some of these old, I mean, are you encouraging people to consider just getting updates right away, or just let it run till it goes? Or
and I think in that case, it'd really be up to the homeowner and whatever their decision is on that, or the buyer or the seller. But there's no building code requiring you to remove and replace that boiler at any point, as long as the boiler is being safely maintained. And I would just check, especially the venting system on that, to make sure that it's not being rusted out, and make sure it's still safely venting to the outside. Okay. But there would be no requirement to replace the boiler.
No requirements.
That's correct.
See, in my mind, I think they're it would be, but yeah, as long as it's safe.
As long as it's safe, keep operating.
Keep it going. What are like the most common renovations that you're seeing in Wauwatosa?
Oh yes, I see a lot of kitchen remodels, a lot of basements that being finished out for the first time. I'm seeing a lot of additions also.
Okay. What's the most common violation that you see?
Yeah, I think the most common violation is pretty boring. It's fire blocking. So I think that sorry, can I start that answer again?
What is the most common violation that you see?
So I think the most common violation that I see is fire blocking. So an important concept of new construction is the idea of stopping flame and smoke from spreading rapidly in concealed combustible spaces. So fire blocking is needed anywhere in concealed combustible spaces where it goes from vertical to horizontal, or between floors. So usually that's just the top plate and the bottom plate. Now the good news is it's usually a very simple fix.
Okay.
But that's something that we're definitely looking for as inspectors, and it's nice to have those things done during inspection from a fire safety standpoint.
Okay. Any particular thing you've seen over the years where you just showed up and you're like, what did this contractor do, or what was this homeowner thinking doing it on their own, or anything you recall offhand?
Yes, I think that happens pretty often. I think that so a few things on that issue. One is that this is why plan review is so important. I do plan review for all of the projects that they issue a permit for that involve changing walls, moving walls, changing a building room's purpose. And I'm really looking to answer the big questions on those. Like, can this legally happen? So, like, if you're trying to finish the basement off for the first time, there's minimum head height requirements in that basement, and there's minimum head height requirements at the stairs, and the minimum width of the stairs. So those are definitely questions I'll be looking to address on the front end, so that we can address those during plan review before I come out there for a framing inspection. Also, things like on finishing off the second floor, things that trip people up is if they're looking to add a new bedroom. You need an egress window if there's only one staircase from the first floor to the second floor and there's no porch. So do you have a 20 by 24 clear opening in each of those bedrooms for egress? Or if people are, hey, I'm going to remove this porch, well, now we have to make sure that all of the bedrooms on there have that egress window in there. Also, there's other clearance requirements that we have as far as like bathrooms. So at least one full bathroom needs a 32-inch opening. That's something that's also difficult in the older homes. So
Okay.
just because you're replacing the sanitary fixtures in the bathroom doesn't mean that it has to come up to code. But if you're changing the size or the shape of the bathroom,
Okay.
now these dimensional requirements are gonna be coming into play.
Okay. Are there any benefits to like adding a egress window to like a basement? Does that, technically allow me to count a bedroom that I, put down there? Or?
Yeah, so much like the second floor, the basement bedrooms also need two means of egress. Now
Okay.
that egress window is one of those,
Okay.
and then the stairs from the basement to the first floor can serve as the other one. So when you would, especially if you're considering an addition, I would highly recommend at that point to add an egress window, just because it's so much easier to add it at the time when you're doing the work than to retroactively come back and do it later. And it gives you a lot more flexibility for the use of that space in the future.
Okay. Well, that's great. Hey, I just thought I'd ask about condos. It seems like there's been a trend in Wauwatosa of more condos. Obviously, there's limited space in a place like Wauwatosa. I mean, do you expect that trend to continue?
Sure.
Go
So
ahead.
I think the need for condos is certainly, there's the need for housing is certainly there, and looking at ways that just looking at the cost of houses for people to be able to come into the community and to be able to build up the housing stock. So to me, it makes sense. I think the challenge is how do we balance that need for housing and the size of the condos with also respecting the neighborhoods and the overall vision for the city of Wauwatosa.
Sure. All right, Paul, maybe we'll start to conclude this episode. I guess one of the last questions, again, going back to DIYers, any red flags that you would, have them look out for when they're starting a project?
So when you come into remodel a space, I think if you, as you're walking through the house, if you see something that you're like, wow, that bathroom doesn't look right.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance that it was not installed with the benefit of the permits. And
Okay.
the danger then is that now when you go to make that permit application, I'm not going to be considering it as a remodel to an existing bathroom. I'm going to be considering that as a new bathroom because that was never a bathroom there legally previously. So any benefit that you would have had from previous construction or benefit of old code, you're not going to have that.
Okay.
So easy things to look out for is if you walk into a room and it looks wrong, especially if you see newer building materials in there,
Yeah.
it probably is. And that's a great time to start looking at, was there a permit for this work? And then also just understanding that if it looks wrong on the outside, what am I going to find out when I open the walls on the inside?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking like probably people add a bathroom in the basement sometimes. Maybe they try to do it on their own. And yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Bathrooms in the basement or bathrooms on the second floor. If you see bathrooms on the second floor where there's no head height or the roof is sloping down really low and you have to duck your head to come in there, that's definitely a red flag that bathroom was added without a permit. Okay. And then you don't. It's always my concern as a building inspector of what did they do to those floor joists to run the plumbing up there and how do they get those?
So you're looking
through?
like safety. Hey, let's make sure everything's safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And then was the plumbing inspected? Was the electrical inspected?
Yeah.
Was any of that done safely?
Okay. Well, I guess to really close this time, hey, what are some of the favorite things you like about your job and maybe the least favorite things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I very much enjoy my job. It's great. I typically I'm in the office in the morning, answering emails, phone calls, doing plan review. I go to go and do inspections. Then around the middle of the day, I like seeing new construction sites, meeting new people. It's always something different. Every job is really different. Every job, every inspection is really different, and it's fun for me to go out there and see the work. And the city of Wauwatosa is a good place to work, and I really enjoy it. On the negative side, I think that some of the things that we talked about, especially in the previous episode, of when I get the phone call about, hey, we did all this work without a permit. We have a permit now, and we're closing on Tuesday. That's really tough. I don't like that. I don't like being the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
I really try to do be proactive and do a good job on plan review so that I'm not delivering bad news. I think that. People might have the misconception that building inspectors enjoy failing projects. We don't. I don't. I don't enjoy failing projects. It's bad for it's a lose for the owner. It's a lose for the contractor. It's a lose for me. I have to come back out there again, and I don't want to be having that confrontation in the field.
Yeah.
So definitely, like if people pull permits, have a nice plan that I can review. I can approve the plan. I go out there. I take a look around. Everything looks great. Definitely my favorite inspections.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, thanks again for coming in. Really appreciate it. I've got Paul Wolfgramm here from the City of Wauwatosa, building inspector. This has been the Snod Pod with John Snodgrass, your mortgage resource, talking real estate, mortgages, building inspections, and beyond. Thanks for watching.